Welcome to the Leo Zagami Show with Leo and Christy Zagami, Saturday, October 17th. No, 7. I was going a step forward. No, October 7th in this month. That, of course, is a lot of creepy references because they start talking about Halloween. And here we're not necessarily endorsing Halloween. We are simply going to discuss witchcraft and the use of supernatural powers, which is a subject that we needed to discuss within Exploring the Illuminati. So here we are with part 36 of our show this year with this series, which is going to end up at the end of December. And it's been a very interesting series. So if you want to actually follow it in its entirety, you say? Entirety? Yes, you can find it on YouTube. Of course, you will have to find our channel first.
Hey, guess what, guys? Our video got removed 2 times. So.
Yes. We
didn't have a video this week.
The video from last week, unfortunately, the August Day, you can still find it on Band of Video. I also uploaded on Rumble, on BitChute. So welcome everybody for the Leo Zagami Show. Let's start the dances then. Here we go. Somebody, of course, is talking about current events, but we don't follow current events in this show until the end of the year. We stick to the script and we explore the Illuminati occult. Witchcraft and the use of supernatural powers is today's subject. We will, of course, like to thank our sponsors. First of all, Christy, we have the names.
Okay, so we have 3 sponsors today. Bruce Kodish, Daniel Estes, and Corey Chavez. You guys are great because of you, we are going to be here until the 28th. So you'll have 90-minute shows until
so let's repeat those names and offer them also an applause.
Okay, so Daniel Estes and Bruce Kodish and Corey Chavez, thank you very much. If you want, we're good for this month now, so we're good for 90-minute shows through the month. So yes.
Okay, so please
thank you.
Support our show. The applause is Christy got it a little bit wrong. Christy, no, because otherwise they might have the impression here.
No, nobody will donate. Nobody's buying the books. We didn't have a video this week, so nobody really bought the book. And so we need your help, guys. So, I mean, we're good for 90-minute shows for, up until the 28th. But after that, we go back to 45 minutes. So it's because there's been 3 people that donate. So we need more. We need more support for this show because it's 103 degrees today, and we've been running the air conditioner for the show.
Yeah, we were actually hoping that for this month we might go back to lower bills.
He spends time to make the show. We always reiterate this, and we're doing this as a service to help everyone to understand what's going on better. We could do something else if it didn't work out. So I mean, we don't have to be here every week. We're just doing it, to
and if you want to help us,
information. So yeah,
of course, you can support us also with the purchase of the books. My latest book is Volume 9 of My Confessions. When it comes down to the donations, they can be you can send them to GoFundMe, you can send them through Cash App. But if you want to find, of course, the Cash App address, you should go on leozagami.com. But at the moment, I'm going to put here on the screen the GoFundMe one, which you can also operate if you want with PayPal, which no longer supports us they have been removed from the possibility of using PayPal, but they told us that you can use it with GoFundMe, so that's an opportunity. We also had to give up our Fundly.
We were getting scammed.
Yeah, Fundly wasn't really working that well for us, so here we are left with GoFundMe, but that's okay. Of course, now we are going to discuss the subject of today, which is a subject of great interest, because when it comes down to witchcraft, of course, a lot of people hear constantly, about witchcraft, the Illuminati, this and that and all the other, but then we need to really understand more about it. So today, I actually here have to technically do a thing or two just to fix something, and I will be back with you. So here we are. We should have fixed all the technical diableries, of course. The technical diableries have been sorted out. We can now, of course, start talking about the subject of today. We welcome everybody who has just tuned in. We are broadcasting live on YouTube and Facebook. We will be broadcasting also in the coming hours this video on ban.video. So first of all, what is witchcraft? Well, witchcraft is a belief that, these days, these people who completely dismiss the whole thing. But in reality, witchcraft has a really long history, and some people have been taking it seriously also at the government level. In places like Great Britain, for example, where in 1736 the parliament passed an act repealing the laws against witchcraft, but imposing fines and imprisonment on people who claim to be able to use magical powers. And this act was repealed only in 1951, and that really gave birth to then the whole Wicca thing, because that gave the possibility to finally be able to promote magic and witchcraft, which was forbidden, and rightly so. However, what is witchcraft? Well, there is 3 types of witchcrafts that we can talk about here. There is the first kind of witchcraft that, of course, we encounter in the writings of Reverend Montague Summers, who talked, of course, about witchcraft as something which is, of course, part of the war between, God and Satan. The devil and his hordes of demons, of course, are real in the eyes of somebody like Montague Summers, and the witches were genuinely possessors of some kind of power. The second option, instead, that is found in Russell Hope's Robbins' Encyclopedia of Witchcraft, holds the whole thing to be a delusion. And we can say that the first author that started to say that the whole thing could be a scam and that actually witchcraft was inexistent was somebody who almost 500 years ago wrote a book called The Discovery of Witchcraft. It was called Reginald Scott, and the book was published in 1584. Immediately after, of course, we were still in full witch hunt mode. King James, the guy who also produced that version of the Bible, which of course you all know about, wrote a book called Demonology, which also was inspired by an experience which touched him directly, which were the North Berwick witch trials. Now, the North Berwick witch trials were trials that took place in 1590, where a number of people from various areas of Scotland, East Lothian, and were accused of witchcraft, and were accused of witchcraft in the night of having practiced witchcraft in the St. Andrew's Old Kirk in North Berwick on Halloween night. This trial ran for 2 years. It implicated a total number of 70 people, and it became a very important event, a little bit like here instead in America. We had a century later, from February 1692 to May 1693, the infamous Salem witch trials, where more than 200 people were accused. Now, witchcraft was, of course, was used at times to accuse people also in an unjust way, especially women. We see, though, that with women there is really a kind of idea of witchcraft that we don't find with men. In fact, the word, the etymology of witch, when you talk about witches, you talk about females. And when you talk about male, you talk the wizard, maybe you can say the wizard. But let's understand better the etymology of witchcraft, because, of course, witchcraft might not be recognized anymore here in the West as a problem, here in the West as well, but in Gambia, for example, just to mention one country, there is still people who up until recently have been accused of witchcraft. So, and this is only one of the many countries around the world where still there is witch hunts. And I'm not talking about witch hunts in the sense of going after Donald J. Trump. I'm talking about real and proper witch hunts. Hundreds accused of witchcraft persecuted in Gambia. This is an article. Up to 1,000 people in Gambia have been taken in 2009 from their villages by witch doctors to secret detention centers and forced to drink hallucinogenic concoctions. The liquid they are forced to drink has led many to have serious kidney problems. 2 people are known to have died in kidney failure, and the incidents are part of a witch hunting campaign spreading terror throughout the country. And even Amnesty International intervened. Witch doctor and eyewitness victims told Amnesty International that the witch doctors, who they say are from neighboring Guinea, are accompanied by police, army, and national intelligence agents. So, I mean, of course, when it comes to Africa, then, but you see, even back then, in 2009, you are seeing what a long time ago happened really in Europe, where, like I said, and also when the phenomena started to fade from Europe, it was still alive in the Americas, like the Salem witch trials demonstrated, and in other areas around the world. So here we are to define what witchcraft is and understand a little bit more of it. And when it comes to a witch hunt, witch hunt is a punishment for malevolent magic, which is addressed in some of the earliest law codes which are preserved in both ancient Egypt and in Babylonia. For example, the famous Code of Hammurabi, which really is at the foundation, is like the cornerstone of our civilization in some way, 18th century, so 18th century before Christ, prescribes that if a man has put a spell upon another man and it's not yet justified, he upon whom the spell is laid should go to the holy river, into the holy river surely plunge. If the holy river overcomes him and he is drowned, the man who put the spell upon him should take possession of his house. So, I mean, there was actually, if the holy river declares him innocent, so the holy river, and he remains unharmed, the man who laid the spell should be put to death. He that plunged into the river should take possession of the house of him who laid the spell upon him. This is, I repeat, the Code of Hammurabi, and is about probably one of the first forms of witch hunt. Then we find, of course, the witch hunts much more popular and known to us in that period, the early modern period, if you want to call it early modern period, which goes from about the year 1400 to the Enlightenment age, 1782. Because with the age of reason, they basically decided that there was no need to go after people who made use of magic in such an aggressive way. Even if, like I said, the law, for example, in Great Britain stayed in place until 1951, so there was still a law. So, for example, the activities of Aleister Crowley were deemed theoretically legal. No? Now, 40 to 60,000 people were killed due to the suspicion of practicing witchcraft during the time frame 1400 to 1782. It's said that black magic and these practices that started to then become punished by the Inquisition, because before that the Catholic Church didn't really punish up until the 13th century anybody for this kind of, because there wasn't in their eyes any heresy. But then when, for example, Gnosticism started to resurface with the Cathars, the Albigeans, and it became also a dogmatic matter. We can say that basically throughout the medieval, people think about, witchcraft and the Sabbath as almost the medieval era, but that's not correct. Eventually, we call it in Italy Alto Medioevo, which is the last part of the medieval time. But mainstream Christian doctrine denied the belief, the existence of witches and witchcraft, condemning the whole thing as pagan superstition until then. But the work of the famous Dominican Tommaso Aquinas, and here we have to say that the Dominicans then became the driving force of the Inquisition until the arrival of the Jesuits. Then when the Jesuits arrived, of course, they overcome the whole, they became the inquisitors. They became the guys who were in charge of this Inquisition. Now, this is volume 9 of my Confessions, and in this book I cite, for example, the Compendium Maleficarum, which was one of these witch hunt manuals, which were used also to describe and to understand and identify how you can find out if somebody is practicing or not black magic. Now, in my latest book, though, I also explain how the real evil arrives with sorcery almost over 60,000 years ago in the Cro-Magnon. That's when things started to get, because with the arrival of sorcery. And in any case, then at that point, they offended God with their practices, their evil practices. But going back to the modern witch hunts that I just showed, the one in Gambia, but there is many others. The modern witch hunts are practiced today incredibly throughout the world, in places as far and distant, kind of far from one another. Now we have India, for example. There is still modern witch hunts going on in India. They believe in magic. They will go after you in India for practices that are deemed dangerous. Papua New Guinea, how you say Papua New Guinea?
Papua New Guinea.
Papua New Guinea. Amazon, the Amazon. You have a lot of belief there in black magic and witchcraft.
So they're not allowed to practice it?
Well, I mean,
what is that tribe stuff that they do? Is that
no? But then, of course, we are talking about practices that are punished because they are not allowed. You know, if you go to the shaman of the village, or you are within the religion, yeah, no. Of course, it seems more normal. But let's remember that then there is, in this kind of tribal contest, those who believe very much in curses. So then they would say, oh, you went after me, you cursed me, I found, I don't know, my photo or something with my image, or, you know. And so, I mean, we are, nowadays, when we talk about, we are not including here, of course, the phenomenon of ritual murder or ritual abuse, which, of course, we are not including, which, of course, at times is referred also as witchcraft, because it will make us go too far into other directions. But today, there is a lot of countries in which witch hunting is still present, and there is witch hunts in Malawi, in Ghana, in Gambia, in Benin, in Angola. There is lower level witch hunts in Senegal, Namibia, Rwanda, but we can say that the whole African continent is still very primitive, very much connected to this. Several African states, for example, including Cameroon, re-established witchcraft accusation in courts after their independence from the colonial powers. So the moment in which they went back to their own laws, their own sovereignty, that's when they decided that they wanted to reestablish such laws. From Cameroon, Robert Brain and Peter Geshe delivered ethnographic accounts on a child witchcraft scare that tended to remain largely peaceful. After confession, the accused or self-accused children were rewarded with large amounts of meat to induce a purifying vomiting. Now, that is almost a pleasant ending in situations which at times end up very bad instead. Now, we are discussing here these things, when it comes down to Africa, and very, we look down to them maybe as primitive. But when there was, for example, at the time of Elizabeth I, who was the one who, with John Dee, and John Dee gave birth really to the craft of intelligence. He was her 007. But one of the things that Queen Elizabeth once had to ask John Dee was to lift all these curses that were done against her. There were so many curses against the Queen, especially from Catholics, because she was not Catholic. And apparently, it got so bad that they were like puppets made of hair and stuff and images. But then at one point, there was a complete misunderstanding when a guy who had made some kind of magical amulet and thing with a name written of the Queen in one of these rituals, and they thought that the ritual was addressed against the Queen. Instead, it was completely not, it was something to do with somebody who wanted to get closer to some woman or something. It was nothing to do with that. But because there was the name of the Queen involved in this ritual, and they found this name written on a pig, then it started a whole witch hunt. And at that point, all the people responsible for it were brought to the law. But then in the end, it was demonstrated that the guy who was completely innocent. It wasn't his intention. But then there was other cases, like I said, there were cases like much more serious cases where there was the king, King James, had his wife arriving from, I think, from Denmark, and so these witches will gather all together to throw these curses, and then for 3 times the sea got so bad that they had, they couldn't manage to get this wife to, and I think there was the involvement also of an ancestor of mine who was the tutor of King James, who at one point offered himself to go and pick her up, because he thought, okay, I can do it, regardless of the witches that were gathering. And then they were punished, apparently arrested, and wasn't a joke. I mean, so this witchcraft was taken very seriously in England. In fact, I want to show you, there is actually still today in the UK Parliament website a voice for witchcraft. I mean, just to show the importance that witchcraft had.
I've got a witchy vibe when I was in England. I felt very witches around,
well,
witches and witches.
Definitely, England is fueled with, it's very Harry Potter, you can say. No, so UK Parliament, witchcraft says, witchcraft, a perceived facility to summon evil spirits and demons to do harm to others, was linked to religion to the extent that the medieval church had powers to punish those who dabbled in magic and sorcery. Its priests were able to exorcise those who had become possessed by malign spirits. So you see, it says, during the 16th century, many people believed that witchcraft, rather than the workings of God's will, offered a more convincing explanation of sudden and unexpected ill fortunes, such as the death of a child, bad harvest, and the death of cattle. Witch hunting became an obsession in some parts of the country. Now, there is the Witchcraft Act, which passed in 1542, which defined witchcraft as a crime punishable by death. It was repealed 5 years later, but restored by a new act in 1562. And one interesting thing, this was a period of witch hunting. So, 513 witches were put on trial between 1560 and 1700. But though only 112 were executed, only. Still, the last known execution took place in Devon in 1685. When King James, for example, himself participated to one of these witch trials, the one that we talked about earlier, which of course is one of the most known ones. Well, in that case, there was at one point the king himself interviewing these witches, and interviewed so many of these witches that by the end of the trial, apparently, he understood that maybe there were a lot of these people who were making a lot of things up. That, there was a lot of BS. So even the king at that point, let's say King James, who is known as King James I in England, at least, who definitely is an important king. We all know and revere for his version of the Bible. Well, he at one point understood that there was too much. I mean, he had written a book, Demonology. Demonology, I want to show you the book. It's a very important book to actually discover more about black magic. To actually have a king writing a book about demons is pretty impressive, we can say. But that was, let's say, also that period in which everybody was going after this black magic, these witches, and in fact, here you can see actually, written by the high and mighty Prince James, by the grace of God, King of England, Scotland, France, and Ireland, defender of the faith. And so what was written in this book by the king? Well, this book by the king was a philosophical dissertation on contemporary necromancy, the historical relationships between the various methods of divination used from ancient black magic, And demonology included a study of demonology and the methods that demons used to bother troubled men and to tempt them. The book endorses, of course, like the Malleus Maleficarum, the Compendium Maleficarum, the practice of witch hunting. Now, the book is believed, by the way, to be one of the main sources William Shakespeare used for the production of Macbeth, which, it's quite interesting because you have these witches. Macbeth is, of course, one
Macbeth.
of Macbeth. Yeah.
Okay.
So, my English not very good in this case, but Shakespeare wrote this during the reign of James I, and definitely there was a lot of magic going on. Some say that, like I said, after these experiences with this witchcraft trial that touched him very, very much, and everything that happened, he became a little bit more grounded, the king. But when it comes to Macbeth, of course, we are talking about a story which really starts with the prophecy of a trio of witches that one day say, you will become king of Scotland. And by the way, he was an ancestor of mine. So this is, of course, what we are dealing with. Witchcraft dealing with supernatural powers. Some people believe in it, some people don't. I've talked at the beginning, the first kind of witchcraft I mentioned was the one that Montagu Summers believed in, which is like believing is part of this confrontation, which is also a bit my view. There is also a view by people closer to the Aleister Crowley kind of idea, the view of Colin Wilson, that witches and their powers might be real, but the devil and his powers are not.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, which doesn't.
Yeah, sure.
It doesn't really work. At least for me, it's not so. Witchcraft also touches on minorities like albinos. That's why, when I saw, for example, that famous albino we talked about last week when we talked about the Opus Dei, I remembered, though, that the albino has always been a very much in difficulty figure within the communities all over the world. I'm not talking only in Africa or wherever. Albinos, yes, because of the way they are.
We never really cared about albinos in America. We even have a movie about an albino in the 80s. It was like a movie.
Yeah,
I think it was called Powder or something. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but you're right. I mean, but in cultures like, for example, in Africa, albinism is seen as something that is linked to witchcraft, to the devil.
Oh, okay.
So then this is Witchcraft and Human Rights, independent expert on albinism.
Okay.
In numerous countries around the world, witchcraft-related beliefs and practices have resulted in serious violation of human rights, including beating, banishment, cutting of body parts, amputation of limbs, torture, and murder. So, and then beliefs and practices related to witchcraft vary considerably between different countries. And then, of course, the victims. And in this case, then we talk also about the albinos that are definitely a very unusual minority, but not only them. So they even talk about the fact that on September 2017, there was this workshop of the United Nations that brought at an international level, they talk about they highlighted the various manifestations, witchcraft, belief and practice, including accusation, stigma, ritual killings, before looking to identify good practices in combating the phenomenon. Of course, we are dealing at times with primitive cultures, but also with cultures that maybe have an understanding which we should, we shouldn't dismiss everything as just being, either sexual perversions, because there was, of course, there was an archbishop at one point that during the whole, at the height of the Inquisition and the witch hunting, got a lot of ladies to service him, and those who refuse will end up basically burned alive on the stake. Now, there is two ways of killing a witch. Usually the witch will be strangled and then burnt.
You can throw a house on her too. No, that was a Wizard of Oz. Sorry.
No, but the interesting thing is that when you say, I'm going to burn you alive, is because most of the times witches instead were strangled before they were burned. So being burnt alive was the worst thing. Was really when because when you die strangled, it's okay, well, up to a certain extent, but then you get burned. But when you die burning, apparently it's much worse. So that is the specification of you. I will burn you alive. It's a specification. So there is many interesting things that also regard the social missiological significance of witchcraft belief and practice in Africa in particular, because Africa is still fueled with either witchcraft or neo-Pentecostal churches that have arrived in the country in the last few decades, and they of course are condemning this witchcraft and these beliefs. Now, when it comes down to the various kind of beliefs that I said, what is witchcraft? The witchcraft, there was also those who started around, the period in which, when I talked about Montagu Summers, for example, Montagu Summers was this guy who nobody even knows if he was a Catholic priest or not, but he portrayed himself to be one, and there is various discrepancies and various claims that he actually was or not. He started angry and then he went into a seminary. This Montagu Summers was a very particular, eccentric guy. Mm-hmm. He was pushing also his homosexuality in a time in which people were not really pushing that kind of thing with this, with his because intellectually he was very famous, Montagu Summers, and then he wrote this book, but his book is regarded even by the Catholic Church as having some flaws in the translation, in the sources, and so on. However, having said all that, Montagu Summers' work was saved thanks to his boyfriend, and who gave all his papers to the Jesuits, who now have the biggest archive of Montagu Summers papers at Georgetown University, thanks to the boyfriend's family, who I think in the 80s found his papers in Canada and then brought them, I don't know how, to Georgetown University, which, as you know, is a notorious Jesuit university. The Jesuits have always been very... I want to show an image of Montagu Summers because he is a very eccentric figure with a very eccentric hairstyle for sure, who apparently, like I said, nobody really knows if he was or not. He starts his book with a series of thank you to Loreto, the Holy Marys of Italy, all together, and this and that and all the other. Some people say, he claims to have assisted to black masses in England. Some people said he actually was the guy who was celebrating the black masses. So there's a lot of controversy regarding. He was actually a fellow, I think, of the Royal. He was quite known also for his literary scholarship, and he was quite known for having written plays. He was a fellow of the Royal Society of Literature in 1916. He knew Aleister Crowley, of course. So, Summers compiled 3 anthologies of supernatural stories: the Supernatural Omnibus, the Grimoire, and the Supernatural Stories. But like I said, the one that, of course, I'm referring to today is a book which still today, even the Catholics say, yes, it has some faults, but it has also some value, they said. Even some Catholic critics had to admit it has some value. And it definitely is a very interesting reading. I mean, there is some very interesting stuff in Montagu Summers' book, History of Witchcraft. Here we go. And of course, 1926, the departure of the Sabbath. So there's a lot about the Sabbath. And you see, in memory of Loreto and Our Lady of the Holy House and all the various Holy Marys around Italy, in fact, and all the Italians and French Madonnas, that he could find. But like I said, there is very interesting here, the witch, heretic and Ani, the worship of the witch, demons and familiars. It focuses a lot also on the Sabbath. Now, he has a point of view that is considered maybe a little bit too partisan because he was a religious man. So, he believed in this conflict between good and evil, though he was a very eccentric figure. But then there was another person that influenced very much the study of witchcraft, not in a good way, because she picked up and promoted this idea that witchcraft wasn't heresy against the church, but it was actually an old religion, pagan cult, that in some way survived, and that had a horned figure, and that basically, and this woman was called Margaret Alice Murray, which I'm going to show you now a pic, because she was particularly influential. Now, Montagu Summers never believed in what she was proposing, because she was more or less a contemporary with Summers, with Crowley, but this woman and what she proposed became very successful, very, very successful. She was an Egyptologist, an archaeologist, an anthropologist, an historian who had worked at the University College of London, who served as president of the Folklore Society. And so she came from a middle-class English family, raised in the colony, which was India, Calcutta. And at one point, after her university, after her studies in archaeology and so on, after being active also very much in feminist circles, so that can give you also another idea, she started to promote this witch cult hypothesis, which basically she then published in her books. She also was writing a lot of articles for the Encyclopedia Britannica, and she was received particularly in an enthusiastic way by occultists like Dion Fortune, Louis Spence, and others. So, because the way that she was proposing this, she was giving a cover to Satanism by saying that in reality the witch cult was an old religion, or was something that wasn't like an opposing to Christianity, but it was rather a reappropriation of something that was otherwise lost. And it was she's because of her, because she had excavated the Bronze Age megalithic monuments, she had done a lot of research in archaeology and so on, and she had also the academic lore to convince other people. When she came out with this book called The Witch Cult in Western Europe, she was very successful. And she was, of course, nowadays, this thesis has been dismissed by most academics. But you see, at that time, there was one guy who was redefining the whole scene when it comes down to discussions of magic. Yesterday we saw a film, no?
Yeah.
Which film was that?
No, the Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. It was so good. One of my favorites.
Yes, and he was from that environment in which one of the main figures of that time was Sir James George Fraser, who himself was very much somebody who had studied anthropology, comparative religion. It was an academic, but had also become very successful with the Golden Bough. The Golden Bough, studying comparative religion, it's a book that the Illuminati milieu loved very much. And Fraser attempted to define the shared elements of religious belief and scientific thought, discussing fertility rites, human sacrifice, the dying god, the scapegoat, and many other symbols and practices. And his thesis is that all the religions were fertility cults that revolved around the worship and periodic sacrifice of a sacred king. So Fraser had almost a magical way of interpreting reality and proposed that mankind progressed from magic through religious belief to scientific thought, almost one into the other, and abandoning, of course, magic for religious belief, and then later on for what will manifest in scientific thought. Now, Margaret Murray instead what was she proposing with the witch cult in Western Europe, which became enormously successful, and this anthropological book she published in 1921, at the height of the success of Fraser's Golden Bough. This book redefined what witchcraft was at that time. And I think that even Wicca, because also we have to understand the word, when it comes to witchcraft, why is it called witchcraft? Because there is also an etymologic connection that brings us right to Wicca, because witchcraft is basically from Old English vice, Wicca. So that is where Wicca comes from the word witch, the Old English vice. Masculine was, of course, warlock, but Wicca then became a neo-pagan religion that was promoted and was literally born with the end of the act that prohibited magic in the 1950s. So it wasn't this ancient witchcraft. We said the Witchcraft Act was repealed in 1951, and at that point they could openly promote themselves and present themselves as beacons. That was the birth of Wicca, that also saw people that we have discussed in the past. Now we have discussed, of course, the Gerard Gardner. We have discussed his link also with the usual Aleister Crowley. But for me personally, Gardnerian Wicca was something that I encountered from a very young age.
How?
Because, you see, when I was a kid, I bought this book from the pagan pioneers, Gavin and Yvonne Frost.
How old were you?
I was about 10 years old. So in the back of...
Your mom let you buy that?
Well, actually, I saw it in the back of a comic. There was this, The Power of White Magic. It was entitled in Italian. But in reality,
that's a trick.
It was a trick, because the real title wasn't the power of white magic.
What was it?
It was The Power of Witchcraft in English. It was a completely different title. The Power of Witchcraft is not The Power of White Magic. So already that. Then when I started to read it, because I ordered this book, but I didn't have the money to buy it until I put together the money. I think, I don't know.
How much was it?
It wasn't a big amount, but I was a kid. I didn't have any money, so I put all this money through a few months together to buy this book, and I think that I got it for some exam. I don't know I was doing or something, but in any case, this the power of white magic. When I open, and I think you can still find probably the original cover, but not also the Italian one, so you can see the difference. I mean, I was genuine in my endeavor. I thought that this was positive, the way they were proposing it.
Okay.
When I started to read it and I saw that you could use this magic actually to hurt others, I was kind of disappointed.
Did it say like you had to sacrifice something? Like, well, I always thought. I mean,
well, no, it wasn't. I mean, with Vika at this level, it wasn't really about sacrificing much. It was about drawing siege things and doing all kinds of practices.
Little like
astral plane. Wandering in the astral plane.
That's so dangerous.
I know, absolutely. But you see,
the New Age phenomenon is mixed.
This was
too.
Absolutely, but Vika, in fact, is part of the New Age phenomenon. I mean, like I said, Vika, and then there was Aleister Crowley, who himself was part of this.
He liked witches, huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the Gerard Gardner, who was this English beacon, who then became the inventor of the tradition, which is now known as the Gardnerian Vika, and then you had also other forms of Vika. You have the Alexandrian Vika, which is derived from Gardnerian Vika, which is formed instead. The Alexandrian Vika is a tradition founded by a guy called Alex Sanders, who with his wife Maxine Sanders established this tradition in the United Kingdom in the 1960s. And I think it was from this tradition that these two authors of this book, which I encountered from at a very young age, which was a little bit of a disappointment. I mean, I'm going to see if I can find the cover, but it was a little bit of a disappointment because of the fact that it wasn't so innocent as it claimed to be.
The problem is that you're reading it innocent, but the demons don't take it innocent. They take it serious. So you go and do that, they're going to want something back. So they always want something back if you do something like that bad, So they want their pay. And they'll take it, any way they can. So
yes, no. I mean,
payback's a bitch.
Okay. What happened was what happened was I was trying to understand more, and when you are a kid, you are easily, open also to magic in a natural way. And I, in fact, actually ended up practicing certain rituals which were devised in this book with a group of kids. Fortunately, nothing happened to us. So we didn't unleash hell. I mean, we were pretty lucky. But because the book in itself probably wasn't that great in directing us. But the book that it was written by these two people, which I'm going to show you. Gavin Frost died in 2016. So, and him and his wife had founded what will become the church and the school of Vika here in the United States at the end of the 60s. He was actually, I think, Welsh, but he was British. And then he moved here to the United States. And in fact, when I was reading this, at the beginning, this introduction of who these people were, and it was kind of, but the strange thing about this Gavin and Yvonne Frost, they were actually so controversial because of some of the things that Gavin had written, also that really, I think, put him in the range of like pedophilia, because he was writing about the sex of kids that needed, not in that book, but in another book, apparently. That when the book was published in Italy, it wasn't published with their names. They had even changed names. So it wasn't it wasn't the book of Gavin and Yvonne Frost, which I bought. I tell you the title because in Italian it had a completely different name. In Italy it was entitled Power of the Magia Bianca, and the names was John and Katie Fair. I show you, just to show you the level of money, because it was so scandalous what happened in the 70s with them. Magic Power of Witchcraft. This is the version by the English version. I show you. And then I'm going to show you the Italian version to show you how they actually push this on children that shouldn't have had any access to this kind of thing, especially with the history regarding this guy who, see here, this is the book, The Power, Gavin Frost and Yvonne Frost, The Magic Power of Witchcraft. Okay? Now, let me show you how it was presented.
I was ordering sea monkeys.
Well, it was actually in the same section with sea monkeys and that kind of thing. So there was actually, it was in the same section. John and Katie. See, this is the Italian version, and it's similar. They made it even similar, the cover, but the title and the title, and of course the way it was presented was completely different. Watch here, and you can actually still find it probably on even on Amazon today, and it's, see,
it still looks pretty ominous and scary.
And it looked pretty, a little bit ominous, I must say.
Red and black.
Yes, a little bit ominous, but the way it was presented was more innocent. And in fact, it could let people. So I was disappointed by this book. See, this is the 1990, but it says Alessandria. Then there is the. So it says The Power of White Magic. This is the 1980 version. This is the 19. Show you the. There is also other versions of it. But you see, for a child who goes on a comic strip and sees this, and then they were presented in a way, the whole thing was presented in a way that people could easily be misled. And then I was at that point, I thought, okay, this book is not really offering me anything that I can regard as important, so let me go into my father's library and find something more interesting, which at that point led me to find instead, it says here, in fact, published in Rome in 1981. So there is the thing published in Rome in 1981. So I find the original one, which this is the same copy I used to have, which I don't have anymore. I think I lost it in England then. Years later, here we are. See, published by Sans Egar, Roma, 1981, and probably it's a very rare text now. Probably, but still. So this and The Power of White Magic. So at that point, I went into my father's library and I started to see if I could find real magic, serious magic, and then I went into other books, which if you want I can show you, which I still have here, which are much more serious. And my curiosity brought me further and further, and I actually addressed this whole episode in Invisible Master. And I actually show even the cover in Invisible Master of this book we just mentioned, and so on, because it was a moment which defined, which also made me understand, first of all, my disappointment towards all this new age rubbish promises, use of magic, which was very improper, with a lot of promises, because it promised you this, that, and all the other, all these promises that they will add to it. You can achieve success, this, that, and, typical of also of the books that were sold back then in those early 80s. So I was, like I said.
And you can meet all the women that you want. Did you do that? No,
well,
you're too little.
I was too little, but I guess that somebody like Casanova used the Picatrix for that. And Picatrix is a much more serious book, which I encountered many years later, and that is a very serious, not Vika. But I mean, my first encounter with Vika was disappointing. It made me understand that these mysterious forces that they were addressing were actually malevolent forces, dangerous forces, and the way they were, it was just fake. The way they were putting it through was fake. Because so when instead I went into my father's library to open these other books, and I can show you some, like those ones, Magia Pratica 1, 2, were probably my first two books of magic. And these are very, you can see from, just give me one. It's okay. No, the more recent one. This ones, for example. Now, this series here, I remember watch how used and
Used by?
No, well, my father, and then after I was like, I went into my father's library.
This is not good.
No, well, of course it's not good, but that is what led me to become what I became. So yes, later I rejected, but these were actually books that contained things that were much more serious. And I can tell you that I also took the whole thing very seriously. Even when I opened these books, I was kind of scared.
Yeah.
Healthy. I was. But in the end, let's say that I was quite lucky to have understood rather early that the real thing was not this kind of low-level witchcraft, magic, grimoires, and all that, but it was alchemy that I needed to study. At the same time, I can understand that the grimoire was important to make me understand also the content with the invisible world, which then pushed me in 1993, like I also wrote in volume 3 of my confessions, and I also, inspired some elements of my work there, because that was the moment in which I practiced the magic of Abramelin the Mage, and that was,
Yeah, you had no good influence on you. Thank goodness I came along.
Goodness Christy came along, but at that time it was 1993. I was 23 years old. 23 is a magical number for the Illuminati. 93, of course, is a magical number for the Illuminati of Telema, associated to Aleister Crowley. It was a very important year for me. I got initiated in Freemasonry, and that was the year in which I got also initiated with the Illuminati of the New World Order, and I understood that the world that surrounded me was a very different world from how people imagine. So witchcraft in itself, going back to witchcraft, because of course it all started from there. Now we gone to the pagan pioneers, and in fact, when you see the faces of these two people that published that book, which I discovered at the back of a comic strip, you say, who are these people? I mean, it's hilarious. I mean, what kind of people are these? And she looks like a man almost. They get this guy.
You need a beauty spell.
And it talks about
these witches are always so ugly.
This was like,
and the evil people are always so ugly.
Look
at Joe Biden.
Yeah, well, Joe Biden is particularly evil. So it talks also about all the
Hillary Clinton.
Well, Hillary Clinton is definitely a witch, that's for sure. So understanding a little bit about my own experience, because they call the witch. Then also there is another particularity about witches. Well,
people in the chat are making me laugh.
Okay, so witches wear a garter, and that is a very important thing. During the Sabbath, they say to wear a garter, and then we have the most important order in the UK, which is the Order of the Garter. Okay. So this makes you understand also the close association of the royals with witchcraft, which is also something that we need to understand.
Yeah, what's up with that?
So, because we talked about, of course, all this witchcraft going on during the times of Shakespeare. There was also, but what is the connection also with the Order of the Garter? Because the Order of the Garter is nominated even during the initiation, when you are initiated with the emulation ritual of Freemasonry. You are mentioned this Order of the Garter. And one of my favorite Beacon tales is about the creation of the English Order of the Garter, because this tradition says basically that when a priestess has hived 3 covens, she becomes a witch queen, and is entitled to wear a green snake garter with a buckle for every coven that she has hived. For instance, the title Magos, who does not get any garter, the women gets this garter, so this thing that she puts around.
Oh, so sexy on the witch.
Sexy, the garter. Okay, so basically, the tradition of the garter was mentioned by Margaret Murray, which we discussed just a moment ago, who said that the garter was historically a badge of a witch.
A what?
The badge of the witch was a garter. Whether Margaret Murray was correct or not, we don't know, because Margaret Murray was not correct with other things, so we don't really know. The story goes that the Duchess of Salisbury was dancing with King Edward III when her garter, her green garter, mind you, fell to the floor. Supposedly, the whole room went silent because, there is scandals. Okay. Which assumes that the rest of the court knew that the green garter symbolized something, because the garter. But what did it symbolize? Witchcraft, of course, and waited to see that what the king would do. This garter falls on the ground. Let's see, is he gonna condemn, saying that she's a witch or whatever? And so they all waited for what the king will do. This was the time period when the Inquisition was kind of very strong, raging across Europe, though it hadn't yet made it to England. According to the story, the king picked up the garter and tied it to his own leg. That's why the Brits started to become a little bit traveloni. They kind of like they were the ancestors of drag queen. No, we know that the Brits they are a little bit maybe with all their boarding schools and stuff tend to have weird and they like to be beaten up. Okay. A lot of weird British perversions.
Anyway, those Japanese people are like that.
I guess the Brits. So at that point, according to the story, the king, picked up this garter, tied it to his own leg, and said a word in French. French was very much in use, which meant evil to those who think evil. So, you see this garter on the floor and you're thinking that she's a witch. Well, I'm going to put it on, and evil to those who think evil. This symbolized to the rest of the court that Edward knew exactly what his dancing partner was up to, the witch. Mm-hmm. But wasn't going to allow the Inquisition to come to England because the English didn't really have a good relationship with Rome, and eventually they will depart and they will form their own church, of course. Thus, the Order of the Garter was created by the king, and it's now still to this day. In fact, Prince Andrew showed up, I think, at the funeral of Queen Elizabeth with the Order of the Garter dress.
Really?
Yes. So this is mean, the Order of the Garter is the top of the elite of the Illuminati. It's only for heads, like for royal houses, heads, king of this, king of that, and the head, the Grand Master, is of course the king, in this case of England now. It used to be the Queen of England. So now it's King Charles III. And by the way, King Charles III, we wrote an article, published an article this week on ZAGAMI.com, which I invite you to go and check, which is about the fact that he wanted Jimmy Savile to become, who was a witch for evil, because then when Vika came along, before witch was only a woman, but then when Vika came along, it kind of became for both genders. Understand? There was also already this. So the Order of the Garter was created by the king to protect England's witches. Again, whether this story is completely true or is only a legend, witches weren't burnt in England traditionally until King James I, which we discussed, who instead, at least for a period of time, got involved in witch hunts. And burning started happening in the 1400s, but weren't quite overall social reaction to witches in England. So the history here is interesting. In Witchcraft Today, Gerald Gardner cites this story, saying the king's weakness saved the situation. Quickness, not weakness. Quickness. Okay. Quickness. Saved the situation and placed him almost in the position of the incarnate God in the eyes of his more pagan subjects. This was followed by the foundation of an order of 12 knights for the king and 12 for the Prince of Wales, 26 members in all, or 2 covens. So it's quite interesting, this, no? Freud's words imply that Edward understood talking about the king, underlying meaning of the Garter, for he says, the king told them it should prove an excellent expedient for uniting not only subjects, one with another, but all foreigners conjunctively with them in bonds of amity and peace. So, let's all come together. It was almost like, and then lots of, they call witchcraft the craft, but Freemasonry is also called the craft. So we have also this whole thing going on. So the Order of the Garter is definitely linked to witchcraft. And this I can confirm also because at a family level, there is a lot of family tradition with these invocations of Lucifer on a Friday, these whole things that were conducted in the castle of Glamis, which of course then is the birthplace for the Queen Mother. And so this there is various interesting stories also regarding I think and it's reported also in this other book which I have somewhere. I don't know if I have it here though. Let me see. But basically I think that the story also regarding the moment in which the Spanish Armada in 1588 was about to conquer England, and they convened a witch coven, a grand coven, to fight them, and and this apparently stopped the invasion. But we know also, we discussed during Occult Wars prior episode of the Real Zagami Show, which people can go and check out also what happened when there was this occult war between the English and the Nazis. So you can go back and check out that episode also. I think that there is definitely a lot of witchcraft in England. And if we want to, I can show you Prince Andrew and the fact that also...
Are there a lot of witches in Freemasonry?
I think that there is some. I don't think there is a lot, but there is definitely a lot of witches that infiltrate Freemasonry. like there is a lot of black magicians and maguses or wizards and sorcerers that infiltrate Freemasonry. It's the
I guess
ideal.
it would be a regular Freemasonry, though, if they're women. Right?
Well, of course, but this is fastly changing as Freemasonry is starting to integrate more and more women, and they're doing it more and more also in regular environments. So nowadays, even if they work separately, there is more integration. And so Prince Andrew has been a Knight of the Garter since 2006, and for his brother King Charles' coronation, he wore his former Garter robes. He last attended the Garter Day service in 2019. So yes, it was King Charles' coronation, not the funeral of his mother, that he was basically... and it says here that Prince Andrew skipped the 2023 Order of the Garter procession. We reported Mr. Procession at Windsor Castle today, and this was June 19. Probably this year they didn't make him. This is how they dress up.
Oh.
This is the official Order of the Garter. Very pompous, eh? It kind of reminds me a little bit also of the Knights Templar of the York Rite with that feather. Okay, so we are discussing today in the Illuminati Occult Part 36, Witchcraft and the Use of Supernatural Powers. Something that, of course, I discuss in my latest book, Volume 9, is also how witchcraft is connected to the use of insects, which is something that, of course, you will have to go and check out for yourself.
That's terrible. And then they want us to eat them.
Now, well, yeah, then they want us to eat them. It's terrible. Now, there is also in witchcraft, in initiations and elevation, witchcraft, also the use of knots, of cords, of
What's that mean?
I mean, like, for example, you have also a knot behind your apron, or there is a cord to establish, in a way, it's part, it's like knotting of the cord is also a practice within the magical tradition. And there is various stages that are connected to knots in the clan of Tubal-Cain, which is another of these beacon schools, by the way. And there is also the tradition of a number of witches that has to be 13, and the number of full moon, for having a witch's coven. There is, of course, we discussed the Garter. That is not just a phenomenon of the Middle Ages, by the way. It's a phenomenon that apparently it's much more ancient. And there is a Paleolithic cave that art found in eastern Spain that appears to show a sorcerer performing in a ritual while wearing nothing but a pair of garters just below his knees. Wow. So the traditional, the use of garters within witchcraft is a ceremonial item. The witchcraft, I'll show you one just so you can have an idea of the ceremonial garter. Welcome to the Leo Zagami Show, Leo and Christy Zagami. Today, of course, we are thanking you for tuning in for our show, weekly show that we like to put together with all this interesting and unusual information about the occult Illuminati and what they're up to. See this card? You put it around.
I just don't understand this at all. I just know the girls wear garters.
Okay,
and that's it.
Okay, now there is definitely a lot of witches that involve themselves in Freemasonry. And I think Christy had an experience of it once, because when you were in that lodge, you were surrounded by them. like you described in your book.
Can I talk about that?
Well, why not? I mean,
am I going to get in trouble?
No, I mean, if you want to give this testimony to us about, because I feel,
is that my first?
I mean, during that initiation, I did a lot of initiations in Freemasonry, and I was, of course, also, I participated to the initiation of Christie, that then later on was passed to, a few months later, she did the Fellow Craft and the Master Mason, and she was elevated to Master Mason. But the initiation, which is the Enter Apprentice, was done in this old church of St. Edmunds in the center of the city in London, in this lodge based in this church. And the people there involved in this whole procedure, half of the lodge was English, and they were all members of the United Lodge of England, but the other half were witches, basically, French, most of them.
Yeah.
And I had this weird feeling like I was really assisting to the three of witches from Macbeth.
Well, and then they blindfolded me, and I had. Can I say this?
Yeah.
Okay, so then I was blindfolded, so I didn't know, but I could see from my blindfold down, so I could see the floor, so I could see where I was walking, so I can't think without looking. I have to look at my thing. Okay, so so I was looking out my blindfold, and I can see, and then you were there in the dark.
Let me straighten up here, because some people think that we have the picture behind us, which is not straight.
But you were actually in there in the dark too, participating in it. But I mean, what I felt was this whooshing like around me, like the witches. So then and they were doing woo and like and I guess they were trying to scare me or something. I wasn't scared. And then you grabbed me, my boob, and I said, "That was you. I know that was you, and you were in here." So you grabbed me. And then he was holding my hand.
Keep this in mind, guys. It was one of the very few times I participate to mixed lodges. I'm very much a traditionalist. When it came to Freemasonry, I was a traditionalist, and usually had always worked in lodges of only men. So I worked in mixed lodges very few times in my life. But, and it was, I think, maybe the only time I ever initiated myself. I mean, I assisted to initiations before, but I don't think I have initiated myself directly a woman. It was the first time.
Well, you shouldn't do that, even though I'm your wife. It's not very nice.
Why?
It's like,
it was okay. It was okay. I mean, all I want somebody else to do it. I mean, I was like,
is that part of it?
I don't know.
He was playing a joke. But anyway, I knew it was you. And yeah, I just knew it was you. I could tell. I could smell your cologne. But anyway, those witches, they were just cackling around in the dark. I think they were, I don't know what they were trying to whiz around me, what they were, they were making this kind of like whoosh, whoosh around me. Like they were doing some weird shit. I didn't like it. And they were whoosh, whoosh around me. I didn't like that. I didn't like any of it, actually. I didn't like the whole experience. Sucked. And yeah, I'm sorry I did it.
Right, sorry. Otherwise, you will not have anything to write in the book.
Well, I had stuff to write in my book about, but it really didn't make me a better person, and it didn't do anything to myself.
In this book, they can read about it?
Yeah, they can read about it. It made me feel like really lose hope for humanity when I joined that lodge and saw what they were doing in there. And I got disgusted, and I wanted to fight evil even more when I learned all that stuff. And so I just really, and I was.
But they're not that bad. They're not bad people towards you.
I could see right through their bullshit. So, I mean, it was all fake and phony. And if you're watching this, I saw through your bullshit. You know I saw through your bullshit. So, whatever. And you know what you did. And you know what you did. They didn't do anything like you're thinking, but they did some bad thing. So. And I saw.
Now. Moving forward with the show. Personally, I would say that there is almost nothing esoteric in traditional Freemasonry today, and what is nothing esoteric is left in most of what is known as social Freemasonry today. We were in a lodge, though, which was chartered by the Memphis and Mizraim. So already that gives you much more of a link with fringe Freemasonry, which is much more occult in nature. Okay, and of course connected to all the history that we know. So I think that was also the initiation they were conducting was very much more sinister than other initiations that I encountered. Black environment, then mirrors, which mirrors are very much used in magic.
There was mirrors. I didn't see those mirrors.
The mirrors, yeah, the mirrors. They took out these mirrors. Don't you remember when they took off your thing? There was some mirrors in front of you and lights.
I don't know. I was just kind of ignoring all of it.
Well, I found it a little bit sinister, but it was a little
gross. I mean, I'm just glad that I understand now. I mean, I probably wouldn't be able to understand everything that I understand now, and I'm really smart when it comes to this occult stuff because I've studied it so much. I never practiced anything bad like that, you know, like bad magic. I only did protection stuff when I was doing it, but still, that's bad too. You shouldn't do any of it. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot, and not all of the experience was bad with the Freemasonry at that thing, because there was some really there was actually some good people that were there. So thankfully there were some good people. I could tell they were Christians, and actually, as bad as it sounds, I was staring at a
we were in a church. Jesus. We were in a church.
I was in a church,
in an Anglican church, but it was a church.
Wrong, though, all of it. It's so wrong to do that in a church. Shame on them.
But the original Masons were the constructor of the cathedrals and the.
Well, they weren't doing regular Mason stuff. I don't think. I don't know what they were trying to hex me or something. I think those witches were up to bad stuff in there.
I think they were a little bit witchy, definitely a little bit witchy. So I mean that. There is a notion that magic is connected, to also to telepathy, to the paranormal, to events that are unexplainable, and definitely you connect also with the egregore, that the thought form that you put together when you are in a lodge. And
I did not want to connect with that thought form at all. I just felt it was all right. I don't want to talk about it.
No, but like I said, sorcery must be, though, clearly distinguished from ordinary magic or witchcraft, because the use of extrasensory powers, like I say in volume 9 of my confession, that is telepathy and water divining, simple forms of witchcraft, for example, that don't bring to the same consequences. Sorcery is the attempt at the systematic use of such powers by means of spells, potions, rituals, and so on. So a simple distinction would be to say that witchcraft is fundamentally passive, sorcery fundamentally active. But perhaps the most important distinction is this: witchcraft and magic depend upon higher levels of consciousness, like Colin Wilson used to say, a wider grasp of reality that man normally possesses. So when I became curious of magic from a very early age, because of the environment I was brought up in, because I remember that before I even brought that book of white magic, I heard about Cagliostro, for example, who was a member of my family. I heard about him being this magician. But Cagliostro never really did anything evil. There were people who used some form of magic to actually help people. Count de Saint-Germain apparently did the same. But then you have people that were clearly evil, like Aleister Crowley. Even if Aleister Crowley said, I'm practicing white magic. Well, what kind of practicing white magic? It's obvious that he was evil. He was identifying himself with 666. I mean, that's not really like a positive thing. So I think that the fact that we want to search for we want to search something different. We you know, and of course, you know, some people feel like with the magic they can obtain things, and that is completely wrong.
No, but if you ask God and if you pray, God will answer your prayers. He will. If you pray, God, ask and you shall receive, and I really believe that. If you're worthy, I mean, God doesn't just give. You have to be worthy. God makes you work.
Yeah.
But that's where the best gifts come from, God. So.
Yes, I think that, you see, I did a lot of mistakes in my life. I later realized them. And of course, as you know, in 2006, that's when I wanted to become clear of all that by writing my confessions online, starting a war against these people, which actually had already been fought behind, you know, in the close environment of those lodges already, between me and people like Fritzford and others. I talk about this magical warfare that went on between me and these sorcerers from the Illuminati that were very powerful ones that cast me over and over again. I ended up having to be exorcised over and over again and so on. So, I mean, I believe in witchcraft and in the existence of witchcraft. I might not have not the same exact ideas as Montagu Summers, but I think Montagu Summers was, in my eyes, the one that at least had understood that this is part of the great confrontation between good and evil. And I believe that because I'm a believer. So I have that kind. I'm not like Connie Wilson, who says witches are real, but the devil and his powers are not. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. I don't even believe that all of the accusations, of course I don't believe it, that all the accusations against all those thousands and thousands of witches that were put on the stakes were real. Mm-hmm. Many of them were instrumental. They were probably... there were also men that were brought on the stake and stuff.
Like the Salem witch trials.
Of course, the Salem witch trial is an example of something that really, in a way, is part of American history, mm-hmm. and that we can never bring. The Salem witch trials were a series of hearings and prosecutions. So people accused of witchcraft. In the end, more than 200 people were accused. Not all of them, of course, were killed, though. But there were 19 that were found guilty. Actually, 30 people were found guilty, and 19 were executed by hanging, 14 women and 5 men, as well as even 2 dogs were killed. Now, there was a man, Giles Corey, that died under torture after refusing to enter a plea, and at least 5 people died in jail. Now, what happened in those Salem witch trials with those Puritans? It's something that, of course, has benefited, unfortunately, the evil side more than us who are trying to fight witchcraft, fight the evil. Because nowadays, and in fact, in the case of my own experience, when I bought that book and I discovered that this guy had the headquarters in Salem, that the guy who wrote that book, The Power of Witchcraft, and so understanding that you have basically in front of you. Also episodes that were part of a strategy that, of course, didn't always benefit us, and at times brought also to die innocent people. Innocent people probably haven't done anything wrong, didn't do anything wrong, but ended up being killed for the fanaticism of some other people. But having said that, we need to find a balance between the fanaticism, the fundamentalism doesn't bring anything good, and the extreme liberal progressive ways of today, where we have a society that absolutely dismisses the existence of witchcraft. And I don't know if that is completely positive. We saw, of course, that witch hunts are still conducted in certain countries. We don't want to necessarily, start again lighting the fires of the whole Inquisition here. I'm not saying that. But the fact that here in the West, we have now this idea that we can completely dismiss thousands of years of history, saying it's all garbage, it's just superstition, I don't know if that's really the right thing. We need to find a balance here. I have a book that is Confessions of an Illuminati Volume 8. In this book, I showed how within the realms of show business, a lot of black magic and witchcraft is conducted freely, promoted, people literally making videos, burning pages of the Bible and doing terrible things like that. I don't think that is the right thing. So, the fact that magic and witchcraft are now being projected onto us for the last 100 years with Hollywood. And I explained that with the Kenneth Anger and all that in my books. In volume 8 of my Confessions, for those who are interested. It's a big book, I know, but a very important book. And of course, in this other book instead, which is my latest book, volume 9, I also explain the various differences with sorcery and witchcraft, and why, in the end, when you abuse this kind of power, you inevitably tend to, at that point, be punished by God, who will come down on you really heavily.
You don't want God mad at you.
So you don't want God mad at you. So you shouldn't indulge in any activities that are related to witchcraft or to supernatural powers, because the main power is from God, and only with prayer, only with the intensity of your prayer and the sincerity of your heart and your prayer, you can do things that you can basically, of course, oppose all this mambo jumbo. And when talking about mambo jumbo, and mambo is the voodoo priestess. I mean, you're talking about the reality here. There is still a lot, and we had a whole episode on voodoo, which is also a very powerful form of witchcraft, which is still conducted here in the Americas and has been brought traditionally from Africa. And see how, for example,
I feel like there's a lot of witchcraft going on in this country. I feel like on the left, there's a lot of witches, and they're casting a lot of spells.
Absolutely.
There was just this full moon. I mean, I
have that. I have. Can you pick up those books there? Because this is very important. I mean, the left is, of course, and here I have a bunch of books that today also I was consulting for today's show, of course. And this is a Goya's painting, which I put on the Saba, which I think is fantastic. Fantastic. I mean, that gives an idea of the Saba. The idea of the Saba, which was basically the witches with the evoking Satan and putting him at the center of this. And then The Magic of the Resistance, a book that is actually written by a leftist Freemason, Michael M. Hughes, who has invented this curse against the binding of Donald J. Trump, who now is trying to curse Vladimir Putin. And there is a lot about witches. And also, actually, in this book, it says that there is even a organization, a modern organization, which is called Witch, which actually stands for, is the initials. Who is tired?
Baby.
Why are you tired, Rambo? What's up with you?
He's tired of listening to you.
No, but it's important. Watch this. Women International Terrorist Conspiracy from Hell, a group of radical feminists who took inspiration from the creative, shocking political theater of the hippies. This organization also works actively against Trump. So, I mean, this is crazy. And when it comes to witchcraft here, I would like to remind what Eliphas Levi, the great initiate, said about the aims of witchcraft and magic. And with this, we can really conclude, because it's a perfect way, I think, quoting Levi. So, Christy, you want to read it?
Where is it?
It's this one here, this
Okay.
this passage here.
To deceive the peoples for the purpose of exploiting them, to enslave them and delay their progress or prevent it, even if possible. Such is the crime of black magic. That's it?
That's it. That's
That
it.
is a crime.
And definitely it's a
Don't do
crime.
it.
Eliphas
Don't do
Levi, the great initiate, has defined the aims of magic and witchcraft with these words that Christy just read. Thank you so much for tuning in. Keep on supporting the Leo Zagami show. And now let's do the dance macabre once again.
Baby, you have to
Until
dance.
next week.
You have to dance.
Here we are.
Dance! Baby, you have to dance. Why are you so tired?
This is tight.
No. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye, everyone. Very particular images, I must say, very scary images at times. I hope you enjoyed the Leo Zagami show.
You don't even dance. I dance all by myself every day. Bye, everyone. See you next week.
See you next week with the Leo Zagami show. Bye bye.
Bye.
And from Palm Springs, California, that's all. Next week, a little bit more.